Hello and welcome to another episode of Comic Fridays. It's been a couple of months since we did our video on how to start a comic, so now I want to talk about what will inevitably have started to crop into people's heads, whether they should quit. Now, I'm not going to say that you should quit. What I want to talk about instead is the stages that you have to go through if you're thinking about it. So, stage one, first of all, you have to decide whether you're actually feeling like you want to quit or whether it's just a momentary slump in your enthusiasm. Because I'll say now, I've been doing this for just over 18 years, and I've had plenty of experience of that little period in your life where you think, am I wasting my time? Perhaps you haven't got the readership that you wanted. Perhaps you haven't got the amount of comments on your site that you wanted. Whatever the reason is, there will be a time when you think, am I wasting my time? And the answer is almost always no. Not if you actually enjoy what you're doing. Here's the thing. Your comic, it won't be brilliant straight off. It doesn't matter how experienced you are at drawing or writing. Your comic will not be what you want it to be right from the outset. It just doesn't happen. And also, your readership won't appear just overnight unless you are monumentally famous, in which case you're probably not watching videos on how to make comics. So you're going to have to build your audience, and that takes time. Even some of the big names in web comics took a long time to get their audience. Penny Arcade didn't get famous overnight. Scott Kurtz didn't get famous overnight. Brad Geiger went to a convention, and while he was sat at the convention with no one coming and talking to him, started his comic that made him famous. He started there and then at the convention. That takes an awful lot of guts to decide, you know what, I've got to the point where I can't do anything more with what I'm doing now. It's time to move on. Which brings me to the next point. Are you thinking you want to quit because you just want to get out of comics? Or are you quitting because you think, this is not what I want to do? I've actually tried it and I thought it was a good idea, but it's not going to get me what I want. It's not what I want to do. It's not what story I want to tell. I'm going to do this instead. Because if that's true, that's a different matter. That's not quitting. That's moving on. Project's end. It's just one of those things. So look at it and think, can I draw this to a successful close? And if you can do that, do it. If you can't, if it's like an ongoing gag-a-day comic, then finish the week off with your roundup or something like that, and then decide whether you're going to move on. But if it is a story that's got an actual end and you want to actually say, right, this is where we end, get to that point. If you can, get to that point. If it's 2 or 3 years off, then perhaps you might want to just sum up and then move on, but never leave it just dropped. That's not going to help anyone. Don't do that. That's not good. But don't think that you're chained to a project just because you started the project. You can leave. You can move on. That's perfectly fine to do. So, decide whether that's what you actually want to do, and then make the steps to do it. Don't just drop it and run off. But remember, you've got another project you're going to put most of your creativity into that. Finish the one that you've got there. Move to that. That's a perfectly valid thing to do. There's many, many comic artists who've done that. For example, Brad Geiger, like I mentioned before. Now, that's not quitting now, that's just moving on. The final thing is, do you want to drop the property at all? The thing that you've been working on, the thing that you thought was a really good idea, turns out, because you're thinking about dropping it, that maybe it's not quite right. But it doesn't mean that it has to end. You could take the option that Scott Kurtz did when he was looking at PvP and deciding whether it was right for him. He didn't drop it, he didn't stop and move on to something else. He looked at it and went, right, I'm going to take a week off. When I come back, it'll be a bit different. He looked at it and decided what was wrong. What was there that was making him want to drop the comic and quit? What was the problem? And how do you fix the problem? So he did that. He took the problem and moved to a solution and kept with the comic. Because he loved it. He wanted to do the comic. And there's nothing wrong with making changes. So he took a bit of time, made the changes. That is perfectly valid. You don't have to stop. You can reboot. And that's the thing I want to talk about as well. Rebooting a comic. What do you do with it? The simple thing is, you take what is the core of the comic and decide, right, I'm keeping the core idea. It could be anything. Look at your comic, decide where its main function is. With your comic, what are you trying to say? Keep that. Build and rebuild everything else around it. For example, you've got 12 characters at the moment, but it's not really working out. So, do you need 12 characters? How about 3? Can you work with 3? Keep 3. Which are the 3 that help really put forward the message that you want to keep in your comic? Keep those 3. The rest? Well, perhaps they'll turn up later on when you've got something else to say. Perhaps they won't. It doesn't really matter right now. you're looking at your core focus. What are your settings? Do you need the settings? Would it work better in a different setting? Look at Blackadder, BBC's Blackadder. They brought back Blackadder, but it was different. It was in a different setting, with different people. You can do that. That's perfectly fine. So, look at your core thing, look at your characters, look at your settings. If you had a story-based drama comedy first, would it work better as a gag-a-day comedy? If you had a drama, would it work better as a comedy, or do you have to keep it as a drama? And if it is a drama, do you have the right type of drama? You've got to think about all these things, and then once you've got that worked out, write it down so that you remember what your focus is and what you're doing, and then start building from there. That's perfectly valid. That's perfectly fine to do. Just draw a line under it, say, right, that was before, but now we're moving to this, and this is what we want to do now. Because you've got to remember at the end of the day that your comic is what you want to make of it. And you don't have to quit just because something's not working out. You can change it, or you could move on. And moving on is valid. Changing is valid. Quitting is valid. If everything that I've said doesn't work for you, then it's perfectly valid to say, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to leave it and move on. And moving on might not include going to another comic. Moving on might mean leaving comics, or leaving comics for a moment and perhaps coming back in a year or so, or whenever. That's perfectly fine too. But if you do decide to quit, do remember to tell your readership, because the last thing you want is people just constantly going on with you. Why didn't you finish? What happened? Put a thing out there that explains what happened, or at least brings your comic to a close, and then move on. That's perfectly fine. Okay, I hope that's been useful for you, but we'll leave it there now. What I want to talk about as well now is a couple of reviews. This week, we're going to be talking about 2000 AD's Prog 1872, which is a very interesting one from my point of view, because for the first time that I've seen in quite a while, Michael Carroll on Judge Dredd has actually put in an ending that I actually like. Now, I've said this before, that he has an issue with finishing off his comics too quickly, because he does a time skip and then talks about what happened. And I don't like that in storytelling, but this time he's put a comic together that starts, middles, and ends, and they all flow together. And this is great because it shows what I've been saying for a long time. He's a very, very good writer. He just needs to get his endings right. He's got his endings right. This is good. Really good stuff. But the one that I really liked from this comic isn't Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd is good, and the art is fantastic, and it's a really, really good comic. But ABC Warriors, my goodness. Now, when you look at a comic about giant robots having a fight, one of the things that you don't expect is for it to make you a little bit sad. Now, I really felt for the characters in this one, with the main guy, the lone hero, battling odds that are just insurmountable and being beaten to a pulp, and finding that his entire world is destroyed just because this guy wants him as another plaything. That was just so moving for me. I thought that was fantastic. So Pat Mills has been amazing on ABC Warriors lately. And Clint Langley's artwork, my goodness. That opening frame with Quartz, the bad guy, taunting as MechQuake destroys our hero. My goodness. If that is not on a t-shirt soon, I will be amazed. If that's not on the splash panel on the back of the trade paperback version, I will be amazed, because it sums up the entire story just in that panel. It's fantastic work. So well done to all parties on that one. Now we move on and we find this Three-Rillers. It's a three-parter. It's supposed to be a thriller. It's one of those things where they showcase new writers. And I really love that 2000 AD does this. It showcases new writers and it does it so well. However, this story is going nowhere. I'm really sorry, but this story is not going anywhere. It's dull. It's got too many characters and too little action and too little plot. It just doesn't seem to be doing anything. The artwork is good, and the characters that are there, they've got a bit of personality to them. So the writer definitely has talent, but he needs to work a bit more on a coherent and really tight script, because right now it's just not doing it. However, saying that, there's a Future Shock here as well, which is a one-part story. You get 5 pages, you've got to tell a story start, middle, end, with a twist at the end. Now, that's a pretty good setup for showcasing new writers, especially in a comic. And here we've got writer Eddie Robson, who has really taken that idea and run with it. This is a Future Shock in the style that Alan Moore would have loved in the 80s when he was writing them. It's not quite Alan Moore standard, but it's good. and I really, really liked it. I didn't quite catch the twist until right at the end when it reveals itself and what it was, but it's really good when that happens, because most of the time you can predict these things. Unfortunately, with 5 pages, you do tend to get a little bit of signposting and formulaicness, but this time, well done, you got me. And the artwork is so, so good. When we're looking back, we mentioned Alan Moore as the writer of Future Shocks. Brian Bolland, an older artist from 2008, this is who I was thinking of with this kind of artwork. But it's not Brian Bolland, it's Robin Smith, and he's not quite Bolland level, but his clean lines and wonderful way of just composing a shot, it looks good. It looks really good, so I was really, really pleased with this one. The final episode in this anthology is Grey Area by Dan Abnett, and my goodness, it's really, really, really not good. I'm sorry, most of the time Dan Abnett is fantastic, but this episode, why is it here? I know it's going to be building into something else and we have to establish that the big bad guy is big and bad, but do we need 4 pages to find out that the big bad guy is really big and really bad? Couldn't we have learnt that in another way than him just standing and taunting someone? It doesn't work for me, I'm sorry. Now, Mark Harrison's artwork on it. Now, Mark Harrison's artwork, on the other hand, that is really good. That's really working for me, except his depiction of Birdy. Birdy is the female character, and for some reason he's decided that a woman who spends her time wearing massive amounts of powered armor and beating aliens to death. We saw her in action last week in last week's episode, where she was helping to beat 500 aliens to death. This is not a woman who should be stick thin and have no muscles whatsoever. I admit she probably has an athletic build. That would work really well for someone who wears powered armor and beats aliens to death. But she should have some muscles to go with her athletic build, rather than just being thin. So it didn't really work for me. Aside from that, his artwork is great. It's fantastic. I love it. But he needs to work on making female characters who aren't just Barbie dolls. Anyway, that's 2080 this week. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Judge Dredd is good. ABC Warriors is really good. The Future Shock was good. But you have 2 extras on the end that are kind of stragglers. But nevertheless, it's a pretty good read. And if you read anything this week, definitely go for the ABC Warriors. That's 2080 Prog 1872. It's out on Wednesday, and that's digitally or in British newsagents. For other parts of the world, if you want it in print, you're going to have to wait till probably early next month. Okay, finally, I've got another review for you, and this week it's IDW's Star Trek issue 30, second part of a 2-part story called Parallel Lives, where the crew of the Enterprise, the film Enterprise, the J.J. Abrams one, meet an alternate crew where all of the genders have been flipped. Now, in most circumstances, in most writers' hands, if you're in comics, what would happen is they would play it up for laughs. They would play it as, oh, Captain Kirk, he's a bit of a man whore. Well, now he's a woman whore. Isn't that funny? Oh, they're going to kiss and shag. That's the kind of thing that I was expecting, so I was very apprehensive when I picked up these issues, 29 and 30. Both of them are really, really well written. This is how you write female characters. You take the character that you want, with the personality that you want, and you just happen to make them female. Which is what's happened here. Captain Kirk on the Enterprise, the one that we all know and love, he's very driven. He loves his crew. He's very motivated by the safety of his crew. Captain Jane Kirk from the alternate universe is very driven and very motivated, loves her crew, wants nothing more than the safety and security of her crew. That's how you write the captain of a starship, not as a space whore. Not as someone who just uses the Enterprise to transport their genitals around the universe at warp speed. This is very, very good writing. The plot is next to non-existent, unfortunately, but it's only a 2-parter, and the first part just establishes the female crew. It's pretty good in that respect. It sets them up as real people, real flesh and blood people with actual reasons to be in space. And then the second part, both crews, the male and female crews, they both work together to save their ships and get home. That's pretty much all that happens. But it's the way it does it. It's brilliant. And I love the fact that both Spocks are pretty much the same person. It's so good. But it's so well written, and the artwork is very, very good as well. It looks clean, it looks tidy. Unfortunately, it's got lens flares, but I suppose that we've got to blame Abrams for that. And like I say, it is very, very good. So I'm recommending this one as well. It's out now from IDW. You can probably pick it up from your comic shop, or you can get a copy digitally online, I think. But anyway, I'm rambling now, so let's leave it at that. So thank you very much for watching another episode of Comic Fridays. I hope you did like this, and if you did, remember to click the like button, share it with your friends so that they can get some tips on comics and see some reviews as well. And do subscribe for future videos because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching Comic Fridays, and I'll see you next time.